Hi, y'all. This is Kristen Chenoweth.
Hi, I'm Gloria Stefan.
This is Sarah Bareilles.
Hi, I'm Patty Lapone.
This is Lin-Manuel Miranda. You're listening to the Broadway Podcast Network.
Welcome back to the Theater Podcast, intimate personal conversations with theater's biggest names. I'm your host, Alan Seals, and this episode is with Keith Powell, who plays Toofer from one of my all-time favorite shows, 30 Rock. Just an incredible guy to talk to. He identifies himself as an artist, first and foremost. Just nothing specific, like an actor, a writer, a director. He loves to do everything. So he just calls himself an artist. It's so wonderful to hear. Something else that I really love talking about was his stories about how he's been working with NBC to film at home with his wife, who is also an actor. He's in the NBC comedy Connecting, which you can find now on demand on Peacock and on Hulu. Before we get into this, as always, please find me online at theater_podcast on facebook.com/official theater podcast. You can visit me on the web at thetheaterpodcast.com. Show your support for the podcast. Help the transcriptions keep going at ttp.fm/Patreon, Patreon. Please leave a rating and a review. And now everybody, please enjoy this episode with Keith Powell.
Here you go. 1, 2, 3.
You may most recognize our guest today for his series regular role as James Toofer Spurlock on NBC's Emmy Award-winning comedy 30 Rock. Recently, he has mostly focused on writing and directing, and he's currently writing a feature for Film 44 at HBO Films, and is set to direct his first film, Buffalo. In addition, he directs for television, having helmed an episode of NBC's Superstore, and has a strong background in theater as well, having previously run his own theater company, and has performed at the Old Globe Playhouse and several other places out on the West Coast. He wrote and directed every episode of his web series, Keith Broke His Leg, in which he also starred along with his wife. It won the Indie Series Award for Best Comedy, and he won the Best Actor in a Comedy as well, which is also being currently developed for television. He is now playing Garret on the new NBC comedy Connecting. Keith Powell, welcome to the Theater Podcast.
What's up?
That was a lot. That was a mouthful.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
I was watching Connecting, and I want to start with that because I feel it's so apropos to where we are right now. I'm recording from home in quarantine. You're in an Airbnb in LA somewhere, and none of us have the ability to go see friends. And you were telling me before we started recording that you're doing pitches, your comedy pitches for Netflix and other networks and whatnot over Zoom, and losing connections. And Connecting on NBC is a comedy basically set in Zoom land, in virtual world.
It's entirely set through Zoom, and it's one of those. It was one of those opportunities where they gave me a call and said, "Do you want to do a show with your wife, and you never have to leave your house?" And I was like, "Yes." It wasn't even like a hesitation. But I found it so clever how they were able to make 8 episodes. And where you do kind of like the Zoom melts away, like you never really feel like you're just watching Zoom all day, like you would at home, in your regular life. It really feels like it's a bunch of friends connecting with each other, and I really loved that. I really loved that energy about the show, and that's why I wanted to do the show.
Well, I was going to ask because I knew that your co-star, like in the room that you're in, is your wife, and it looks like there's high-end studio grade cameras and everything that are there with you.
That's what I tell people. It's the best looking Zoom you've ever seen in your life. No dropped connections, no audio issues, and everybody is gorgeous.
Right. Always full makeup, perfect lighting.
Right, exactly. But we shot it all on iPhones.
No kidding. I was going to ask how you shot it.
Yeah. I mean, there are some, every episode has like little glimpses of them in their lives outside of it. So like it steps outside of the Zoom world and you see them just at home living and existing. And we shoot those with DSLR cameras. Those, yeah. So
your standard higher end. Yeah.
And those are, and we all have to do it ourselves. And then we record it ourselves and then jump in front of the camera and, act. And then they tell us where to set the camera up next. But
well, that's what I was going to ask about, because it's one of the biggest things I hear from friends in the Broadway world and voiceover world, and they're literally turning their coat closets, their walk-in closets, into sound booths, because that's the smallest space they have with things that they can put on the walls that absorb sound. And I've done stuff with people for radio plays where we built pillow forts around their microphone. But for NBC, with this massive NBC Universal budget, right?
I mean, yes. I don't know. I don't know if it's a massive budget. That's the problem.
Well, like if I'm going to see something on TV, I figured like, it's a couple million that they throw at it, and there's a crew, and there's a grip, and there's the best boy, and then that, and the fly dude, and whatever it is, right? So that's fascinating, because the biggest complaint I hear from people is like, now when I'm doing auditions, I'm my own audio tech and camera person and everything else, because someone was saying they sent in like a 5-minute self-tape, and it took them 5 hours to set it up and film
it. So long. It really does. I think that the good news is that technology is improving. And so you can record a beautiful audition on your phone, right? But because technology is improving, you now have an expectation to make it look good, which takes time. And that's the thing that's what happened with us with the show is that we would begin in the morning at like 7 a.m. and we would all set up our cameras and our light, and then someone would hop on Zoom and just tell us what to do. So, the DP would hop on Zoom and say, turn, your shutter speed down and take the ISO up and whatever it is. And then we do all those things. And then, the grip people come on and they say, okay, you need to put your light over there and you need to have this over there. And then, the sound person comes on and says, okay, attach the sound clip to this. And that is a process that takes, I'm going to say that that's a process that takes like 3 or 4 hours, because they do it with every single person. And then we all record simultaneously. So it's like a play. And they all just press record. We all just press record and do the scene. And it'll be like an 8, 9, 10 page scene that we have had to have rehearsed ourselves, the day before. And then they call lunch. But 90% of the time is us setting up the cameras and the lights and the sound the art department comes and tells us what things we need to get out of our house and what to replace them with, and what console tables we need to build. So it's a long process.
So, basically, you have become the entire crew. You've gone back in time to your early career days of doing everything yourself.
It really does. It feels like summer stock. It feels like all hands on deck, all the actor, and and the whole cast really got close, because it feels like back old theater days where you're just kind of like, all right, somebody's got to build the mantelpiece. I mean, and it's fun. It was actually really fun. I thought I would be driven crazy by performing with my wife, but I actually really enjoyed it.
I think it's one of those things where at the end of it, you're either like, we're done, or I love you so much. Yeah.
That's exactly what happened.
I think I would have just set up every shot and just left it. I wouldn't have touched it because people in theory aren't coming over anyway.
Well, first of all, our dining room was our like equipment room. So we just threw a bunch of stuff in there. It took 2 days to empty out that room.
Wow.
And yeah, there was just so much equipment in that room, and it was just overrun. You could barely walk into that room. And then on top of that, we were the only people in the cast who had a 2-story house. And so our house is on the bigger side. And we were the only people in the show where every week and every scene was in a different location.
Oh no.
I mean, there are some people who, like one of our castmates named Eli, his entire character is that he's hunkered down in a basement. And so he's just one shot. He leaves the camera up. He walks in, he turns it on. He's like, I'm ready to go. And then I'm sitting there for 3-4 hours setting up the whole because, it's a different location, but it was still fun. It was still good.
Oh, I think that sound to me as someone who loves the techie side of stuff. I think that sounds incredibly fun. And you get to work with your wife, and you get to roll out of bed and you're on set.
Exactly. We have a daughter who is, well, now she's 19 months. But she was like a year and a half. When we were shooting, and then we got a nanny who had to quarantine with us, and so my wife and I would be shooting, and then every now and then we're like, pause, our child is screaming. And then you hear her in the background just run, like tearing back and forth. But that was the thing where our daughter, I feel like our daughter was very lucky because both of her parents had to go to work, but both of her parents were in the same house while they were working. And so we kind of felt like we were still there with her,
That's really nice, actually.
Yeah.
When we went to lockdown here, last spring, I have a 4.5 and a 6-year-old, and with my wife and I both having to work, we were just like the horrible parents giving them TV. We're like, we don't know what we're doing. We just got to get to work right now, and just until we figure it out, go be couch potatoes for a little bit.
We're like that now, actually. Right now, I'm like, I don't know what to do with her. I'm going to turn on Sesame Street for hours and just let her go.
I feel like now. Well, tell me too. And this kind of gets into a little bit of a personal side. Is that at the end of the year feels like sort of a relief anyway, like a little pressure valve is being let out and we can start again with the new year. But this year has been a really crappy year.
Oh God, yes.
On many, many different levels. And so now like the election's over, and as we're recording this a few days ago, Biden was officially confirmed by the Electoral College. So like that hump. Yeah, praise me. And so we've got all of the political unrest happening all summer, along with the pandemic, along with just everything. And then in the industry too, I mean, you're one of the lucky few who was able to continue to find a place to work in the middle of a pandemic, right?
But at the very beginning, it was very touch and go. And for some reason, and I'm knocking on wood as I say this, because I recognize just how lucky I am, because I'm now recurring on This Is Us. So I jumped straight from connecting to doing This Is Us, and I'm also in the middle of trying to sell a show. And when we began with the lockdown, I was writing this movie for HBO, and so I went, this will give me time to without distraction, to kind of just focus on writing this movie. And then, a couple months passed, and then I got connecting. And so I kind of just jumped from job to job, thankfully, during this. And I never really had a chance to feel the terribly negative effects of quarantine. I'm also a believe it or not, I'm an extreme introvert. So I don't like leaving my house anyway.
Oh, I very believe it. Most wonderful actors are wonderful introverts.
And and I also did the 30 Rock reunion
Right.
in my house as well. And so I genuinely, there was, at the very beginning, it was scary just in terms of like, how are we going to pay our bills? But thankfully, it all kind of worked out. And in the scary moments of this pandemic, my grandmother used to say something to me that was very appropriate, I think. And I've held it with me, and it's kind of the thing that has gotten me through the pandemic. And she used to say things like, "What's yours will know your face. What's yours will know your face."
I'm processing this.
And as a young struggling actor, I never really believed that, because I would always be like, "Well, I was supposed to get that job." And she would say to me, "What's yours will know your face." And it didn't make sense really until the things that I was supposed to get, I got without really having to fight for it. There's a difference between fighting for something and working hard for something.
Mm-hmm.
And I never really had to fight for the things that were mine. I always had to work hard for them, but I never had to fight for them. And I think that that's what happened during this pandemic, that I got to just stop and do nothing. And all these things that knew my face found me.
Oh, I love that. And you do a lot. You do a lot as well, because I mean, I'm a fan of yours from 30 Rock. That's a show that I watched over and over again.
Thank you.
And yeah, obviously in the intro, you're doing this, you're doing writing. You're obviously very heavy into writing. You've directed things. You have done theater. And so I feel like, well, I guess let me ask the question of you then. What, if you could pick one thing, if you had to pick one thing, what is calling to you the most? What knows most of your face?
I can't answer that. The reason, what I normally tell people is that I'm an artist and I'm a storyteller. And sometimes, I think that acting, writing, and directing are all aspects of storytelling. And, the actor is the vessel through which the story is told. The director is the teller of the story, and the writer is the creator of the story. And sometimes I want to tell stories. And sometimes it means that I get to be the vessel through which the story is told. Sometimes it means I'm the actual storyteller. Sometimes it means that I'm the person who creates the story. And I kind of go where I'm needed most. And so I don't like to limit myself to saying I'm an actor who writes, or I'm a director who acts, or I don't want to limit myself in that way. I'm a storyteller and I'm an artist.
Well, so 30 Rock then, you ironically, I guess you were in the writer's room of 30 Rock playing a writer, and so you kind of got a little, I get to play with something in real life. But for me, that was the behind the scenes of that, even though it was fictitious, was still one of the greatest parts of that show. And well, tell me how you got connected with that in the first place, because there are so many great actors that have come out of that show, and of course, Alec and Tina being two of the two leads, right? Like learning from them had to just be this masterclass that you can't in education you can't pay for otherwise.
It was one of the greatest educations of my life. I learned how to work in television on that show. I was really young when I got on the show. I was 26 years old when I got on it, and I up until that point I had only done theater. So doing that show was a great education in that way. For me, I don't know. First of all, how I got on the show was I was about to direct a play that was going to go on a national tour, starring Keith David and Jasmine Guy. And I wanted to get rid of the set designer. And I didn't know, because I was young, I didn't know really how to. So I wrote it's not you, it's me letter. But I couldn't find him. His emails were bouncing back, his number was disconnected. And so I gave it to his agent. And his agent said, "Well, what are you doing right now?" And because he knew that I had acted in acted in regional theater, in addition to directing, and in the theater. And I was like, I don't know. I'm thinking about moving to LA and, just kind of chilling out until I have to direct this play. And he said, "Well, in the meantime, do you want to just go on some auditions?" And the first and only audition he sent me out on was 30 Rock.
Really?
And then he later died. His name is Brett Adams, was the agent. And he's a big theater. It's a big theater agency in New York now. And Brett Adams represented me during 30 Rock because Brett Adams himself was like, "Yeah, there's this part that might be right for you." And that's how I got on 30 Rock. And the way, what I always tell people, and because there was for a time some dude who got really close to getting the part of Toofer, and didn't get it, and I got it instead, obviously. And he talked a lot about it in the press, about how they kind of stole his stuff. And I don't see it that way. I think that the reason why I got Toofer and why I was what worked in the part for me was that Toofer didn't see himself as a joke. Toofer, the idea of Toofer was that he's black and he's educated and he's from Harvard, and that is a 2-for-1 in a writer's room, that you get a minority hire and a smart hire. And he was written kind of as the butt of a joke, that it was funny that he was black and smart and from Harvard. And I always wanted to approach Toofer as if he was, as if he didn't understand what was so funny. Everybody in his world went to Harvard. Everybody in his world is black. And it's not a joke. And I think that take on the character was something different that Tina hadn't seen. Mm-hmm. And I think was what got me the part.
That's what I was going to actually bring up was that the character, you never made fun of yourself. To you, Toofer, Toofer, your reality was, I'm here because I deserve to be here as much as everybody else. Why are you making fun of me?
Exactly. And then, listen, there are things to make fun of within that. I mean, that self-assurance, there are things to make fun of. But it was important to me to make sure that Toofer never saw himself as a joke, that he took himself seriously, maybe way too seriously, but he took himself seriously.
Did you have conversations with Tina, or did she have conversations with you about where the line was, if anything was too far to bring up in terms of the joke of
we never
race?
We never had those conversations. There were times where there were scripts that where things went too far, in my opinion, and I when I could, I voiced those opinions, and sometimes they were listened to, sometimes they weren't. But I never felt like I needed to hold back on it. I know that, they have a big writer's room, and NBC has some sort of a sensitivity executive who always had conversations with them about race in the scripts.
Oh, that's interesting. It was what? This was 15 years ago.
Yeah. I don't. They weren't called sensitivity executives. I don't know what they were called. Probably diversity inclusion. I don't know.
15 years ago, D&I was still sort of unheard of, especially at that kind of level.
I mean, there was moments where there was some issues racially, but I would talk to an executive at NBC, and the NBC executive said, "Yeah, I flagged that, and that's a conversation that we're going to have." I never felt like I couldn't say something.
That's wonderful. I'm really happy to hear that, especially the last couple of years with all of the scandals and the Me Too.
30 Rock itself that had to take off its blackface episodes.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right. I remember that. Yeah.
So
wow.
So I will say that Tina Fey is probably the best boss I've ever had, and I mean, I don't know if you've noticed, she's really talented.
Just a tad.
So it was really exciting to go to work with just 800-pound gorillas of talent.
Oh yeah. Oh gosh. Like working with her, definitely on my bucket list. I've interviewed several people from Mean Girls too who have said, who've said the same thing. Just collaborative, nice, talented, and just whip smart. So
she's got 3-4 things going on in her brain all at once, and she's answering every one of those questions simultaneously.
We're going to take a short break. Stay tuned for more of the episode. Let's back up in your life, though. You said, I didn't know 30 Rock was your first TV show, but let's back up. You did theater before that, but then where?
I did guest spots on Law and Orders.
Well, if you're in New York, of course. That's what you do. You play Cadaver number 6, but I still count that. No, young Keith, where did you grow up and what got you into theater?
I was born in Philadelphia, but I spent a lot of my childhood in California, in Monterey, California. And then we moved from Monterey back to the East Coast when I was about 11 or 12. And I went to Middlelands High School in Delaware. And Delaware kind of claims me now. So people tell me that I should just cut straight to the Delaware years with where I grew up. So I did a lot of community theater in Delaware, and I did a lot of community theater in Delaware with some people who are now very famous. John Gallagher Jr., who won a Tony for Spring Awakening, was at the community theater that I performed at, and we were friends then. I've known him since he was 11 or 12 years old. And Aubrey Plaza, I've known since she was 11 or 12 years old. And
wow,
lots of really wonderful people, all kind of stuck together and then grew up in the industry together. And I was one of those people in Delaware. And then I went to NYU and I just stayed in New York City. And in the middle of all that, I started a theater company. My grandmother, who was one of my parents, got diagnosed with terminal cancer. And I went back to Delaware to take care of her, help take care of her in the last couple of years of her life. And when you're in Delaware, you get bored. And so I found a theater. I've started a theater company in Delaware. And I was the artistic director of it for a while, and Lynn Redgrave did my very first play.
Wow.
It was extraordinary, and that's what I say that was my graduate school. Right, I was 23 years old, and I was producing a play with starring Lynn Redgrave, and just learning from her, watching her every day in rehearsals was, I mean, you don't get a better education than that.
So early success then, would you attribute that to perseverance or ignorance?
Both.
Because both.
Yeah, both. I mean, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. There's so many people that I've talked to who have had early success in life like that, like early mid-20s, who are just like, if I knew how hard it was, I would have never done it.
Well, I at 23 years old, I set about raising $200,000 to do a play. And I mean, who the fuck does that? I don't know if you cuss on this, but like, who does that? and like that takes some balls. And by sheer miracle, we did it, and we got it. And I've always, it was good to begin that way, and everyone told me I couldn't do it, and it was good to begin that way and for it to have worked out, because it's just now how I live my artistic life, where I just go, it's just better to do it. Let's just do it. And then, of course, it might all crash down around us. But the chances of it's too great of a reward for us to not just do it.
That's the same thing with so many things in life, that if you don't try, you'll never know. No risk without reward.
Exactly.
The worst you can hear is no, etc. There was somebody who told me the other day that they hear their friends going to auditions and say that, they're like, oh man, I messed that up. I lost that audition. I lost that role. That role was mine. And it never was.
It was never yours.
It was never yours.
And you know what? It's interesting because I had this conversation with my wife, who went to my wife is my wife is a visual artist, but she is also an actress. She went to Brown Trinity Rep grad school in acting, and in her early career as an actress, she would always be like, "Oh man, I really didn't get that part, and it got me really sad." And I would say, "How can you mourn for something that was never yours in the first place?"
She'd be like, "Shut up, Keith."
I get a lot of "shut up, Keith." I still get a lot of "shut up, Keith." but that's the way that I see when I don't get something. When I get really, really close to getting something and don't get it, I go, I can't mourn for it because it was never supposed to be mine in the first place.
I think that's resilience. That is learned resilience. Well, I guess, is it self-taught or is it learned?
Oh, I mean, I've had a lot of heartbreak in my career, so I think it's survival. It's a survival mechanism, maybe. Yeah,
wow.
I don't know. My mother and my grandmother were very resilient people, and of course I've gotten some of that from them, but I don't know. It's a lot of failure. Another thing that I always say, I mentor young NYU graduates who've just left NYU and have moved to Los Angeles, and I mentor a new crop every year. And I always tell them, the key to success is figuring out how to survive in an industry that needs you, but doesn't want you.
Yes. Yes.
And if you have that mindset, like, I'm never, you're not getting rid of me because you need me, even though you say you don't want me, then I feel like that eventually success will happen.
I literally had this conversation a few hours ago with a friend of mine who was like, yeah, my success is half perseverance and half resilience. Because
It's also a tremendous amount of luck.
that too, being at the same place at the same time. I mean, that's the trifecta of being a performer. Is that the last third of it is you just have to be at the right place at the right time, but you go back over and over again after hearing no. So it all works together.
Yeah. And I honestly, to be an actor means that you're facing mass failure and rejection on a daily basis. And that's the rejection you hear about. You know what I mean? You're not even like counting the rejection that your agent or your manager has faced and has not told you. and there needs to be some sort of guiding light through it. So for me, it's I need to tell stories, and if I'm not going to tell a story as an actor, I'm going to tell a story as a director. And if I'm not going to tell a story as a director, I'm going to tell a story as a writer. And
well, okay. So what I was going to say was, so through all of that, how do you personally not take it personally?
You don't. I mean, you take it personally. I mean, that sucks. And, I get depressed. You get depressed I've now gotten my depression when I don't get something down to like a matter of like an hour.
Oh, that's not bad.
Big thing, like a couple hours. But I don't know. I mean, how do you not take it? I don't know how you not take it personally. You just do. But you can't reject yourself. So if you're relying on yourself to create the art that you want to create, then you'll have a 100% success rate. Right? And so I see the work outside of the work that I do for me to be, oh, thank God I can pay my rent this or my mortgage this month. Great. I get health insurance. Now let me go back to working on the thing that I wanted to work on. And I think that's kind of, I don't know, to be honest with you. I just, sometimes I take it personally. I don't see how most people don't. I know some who are just like, yeah, shrug it off and they're fine. And there's got to be some level of financial security behind that too, because if you're counting on something to pay your mortgage, then obviously it's got to come from somewhere. If you don't get it, that's devastating. Yes. And I've yet to figure out what that magic thing is, because eating is important.
Sometimes.
I just know that I can't rely on other people to pay me to be an artist. I have to rely. I have to be an artist independent of being paid.
It's the job of being an artist and the fulfillment from being an artist have to be separated. And I can yes. And when you don't get what you want, you create it.
And I mean, again, I'm going to knock on every friggin' piece of wood I can, because I have been placed in a situation, in an environment where I've, thankfully, at least for this year, don't have to consider money. And Lord, I'm now in it so deep. I don't know what to do if I don't consider the money. Like, I don't know what to do now. If the money dries up and I need to pay my mortgage next month, I don't know what to do anymore. I can't do anything. I have no other skills. I mean, there was one time where I took on a semester of teaching at a college, because I was afraid that I wasn't going to get health insurance. And then that's when I got like every big friggin' job possible in that year. And I had to like squeeze in teaching.
And you can't enjoy any of it when your time is stretched like that.
No.
And that's the hard part about acting. In my one of many, not the one of many hard parts, is that if you can't live to work, but you need to work to live. And if you're taking survival jobs, I mean, a friend of mine calls them for now jobs, but sometimes you need them to survive. So yeah. I mean, mental health, of course, is part of all this, your physical health, and then your whole income in general, like health insurance. We're a country without nationalized health care.
I mean, that's when 30 Rock ended, I have been freaking out every year about getting health insurance since 30 Rock ended. And that was 9 years ago? Every year freaking out. And then miraculously at the last minute, I would get something that makes the health insurance kick in. Right. And so, but it's a yearly stress. I don't know how to beat that, or how to not take it personally, obviously, if I don't get work.
Well, you've got so many irons in the fire now, and that I think it's just going to be one of those things now where over the next couple of years, it's just going to be one thing after another that are just going to hit.
That's what I've learned. I mean, that's what I've learned. I've learned that every day I need to wake up being an artist. I have to do something creative every single day. And sometimes that's making the perfect omelet, right? but hopefully if you have 365 tries in a year to work at some artistic endeavor, and hopefully you do that in different ways, in different days. You foster a stable of projects that you're trying to get off the ground, and hopefully that's one of them will hit. That'll allow you to take the other 4 days to try to find the next thing.
Well, you've got writing feature films for obviously Film 44 and HBO Films. That HBO and Film 44, of course, no small potatoes. That's going to be good. And then Keith Broke His Leg, mentioned as being developed for television. So real quick, just tell me about Keith Broke His Leg, which is your web series.
Well, this is actually a great example, and that actually is a good bridge to it. When 30 Rock ended, I was struggling to find my own artistic voice, or a comedic voice. And I'd been living in Tina Fey's head for so long. And so I was the vessel through which, a lot of the Tina Fey jokes were made. And so I didn't feel I needed to reconnect with who I am as an artist. And so I had a minor surgery that left me incapacitated for a week. It wasn't breaking my leg, but during that time, because I wake up every day going, how can I be creative today? During that time, I started to put together in my head, well, if I were going to have my show, this what my show would be like, and how I would do it. And kind of the seeds of Keith Broke His Leg happened. And so it took place. It's not my home anymore, but it took place in my old home, and with starring my wife. Every character in the show are the actual people who are playing them, and it became a tremendous, big, artistically fulfilling, reclaiming who I am as an artist process. I wrote, directed, and starred in all the episodes. And, some of them are great and some of them are need some work. But what I had a goal in mind that this show needed to completely come from basically my id. So I gave myself only one rewrite of each draft.
Wow.
So every time I wrote a script, I just vomited it out on the page. And then I go back and make some, grammatical changes. But it was, so basically what you see is what you get. So I was able to, as an artistic exercise, able to see what is going on in my brain.
That sounds like a form of journaling where you're just like, yeah, you just spew it out, and all of a sudden it's an active TV.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But the show, I'm so proud of the show because the show is nuanced and it is interesting, and it's not just joke after joke after joke. It's not that at all. So there are some episodes that don't try to be funny. There was just sometimes where it lives within the boredom of the character who's incapacitated, but everything is so thought out. And of course, not all the episodes work, but a majority of them do. And I really love just how it operates, because it kind of reset my brain. It reset my brain to be, this is the way I tell stories, and this is the way, and that's not a bad thing. That makes sense.
Oh, it makes total sense. It makes total sense. And everyone has to find who they are. And some find it through singing, some find it through acting, some find it through writing, some find it through running. People. Go ahead.
No, I just watched a movie called The 40-Year-Old Version.
Mm-hmm.
Version, not virgin. And Rada Blank, I think her name is. And it's about her as a theater artist. And 40-Year-Old Version also stands for Find Your Own Voice. And it's a movie about her living in the theater world as a playwright and not feeling heard. And then she becomes a rapper. And then through that, she finds what her voice is. And that was, I think that's my favorite movie this year. It's like, I would definitely, it's on Netflix if anybody, I don't know why I'm now promoting Netflix, but Netflix, you should watch it. It's and especially for theater people, it's a brilliant way of study on how one finds their own voice.
Well, I think that is super important this year of all years.
Yeah.
That and we're coming to so many cultural reckonings this year, and Band-Aids have been ripped off of many things that have been hidden for institutional generations. And one of the things that I like that's happening right now is that as a society, as a country, that we're starting now to talk about publicly mental health, like the younger generation. And like our parents right now are of that generation where they're like, I'm not allowed to talk about therapy. Therapy's not cool. And then there was sometime recently, it was a couple months ago, many months ago, actually, is the last time I was able to socialize with people. I was hanging out with a friend who I hadn't hung out with in person in a while. And I forget how therapy came up. And I said, and I'm 40. I am the 40-year-old version of myself.
I'm the 41-year-old version, so I understand.
and he asked about therapy or something, and I was like, I'm embarrassed to talk about this, but you know what? I'm just going to say it. I'm just going to see what happens. And I said, yeah, I'm seeing a therapist now, and she's great, and all, et cetera, et cetera. And I was expecting to be made fun of. That was for some reason what I wanted to, or what I was expecting to hear. And immediately his first response was, oh, do you like her? I'm looking for a new therapist myself.
Huh. That's great, though.
It is. And it was that moment where I said, oh, it's okay to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It just clicked.
Because especially, unfortunately, in the Black community, the idea of therapy is looked down on. But I got to tell you, my life changed when I started therapy.
Yeah.
I started to see how much I've repressed and how much I am my daily life is a reaction to my past. And um and I think that the stigma of going to therapy has lifted because we now see people in bigger spaces who are emotionally more healthy, and they attribute it to therapy, and so that stigma is starting to lift. Right, my mother, my 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 aunts now all go, oh wait, so did you talk to your therapist this week? You know, which is not something that they would ever have done in the past. And I think it's because we have people in prominent positions who are showing the benefits of it.
Well, it's vulnerability too. It's showing vulnerability.
Yeah.
It's allowing yourself to be seen as more human, and the people who are talking about it are getting validated because everyone else is going, oh, they're quietly raising their hand and saying, oh, me too.
Yeah.
I feel this way too. I'm having the same anxiety, the same issues with depression.
I also think that thankfully we are a society that is tearing down, as well, the young people who are tearing down
young people,
the youngins. They're tearing down gender norms, right? And so the idea of what is masculine or what is feminine is being stripped away, and within that is that you can be masculine or feminine and vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that God bless the youngins for that.
Well, the majority don't, statistically, they don't identify with one sexual preference. They like over half.
I'm that would have been unheard of when I was in high school in the 90s.
Absolutely.
Unheard of. And I think it's inspiring. That we're not that gender and sexuality are not A or B.
Well, I enjoy now too that we're seeing more mainstream characters in our media, and Will and Grace, of course, historic for putting gay characters at the center of a story.
Mm-hmm.
But I enjoy now that there are queer characters that the main point of them being in the story has nothing to do with them.
Has nothing to do with their sexuality.
Right.
Yes, absolutely. And this is what's because it's what I've been fighting for as a minority, as a Black person, where I didn't get called in for things unless the part specifically said that it was for a Black person, and the industry slowly chipping away at that. They could go a little faster in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
But I do believe that we've now reached a point where defining you does not define you, if that makes sense.
Your demographic, your public, your external demographic characteristics
does not define you, and I think that we need to see more of that in television and film, and especially in theater.
Yeah, I agree. There was so much that Rent changed about the industry for that exact reason. And then you've got Hamilton changing for that exact reason again. And now I really enjoy that there are the national tours and international productions of casts that traditionally were one color, or casting characters that traditionally were all of the same ethnic background, that now are, it doesn't matter anymore.
Yes. Yeah. And I don't believe in colorblind casting. I believe in color conscious casting.
Yes.
And that's also a big change that I love that the youngins are embracing.
Oh, those youngins. All right. So there are 3 questions that I ask everybody to wrap up every podcast episode. The first one is, what motivates you?
Oh God, my family. I mean, obviously for the deeper, for the superficial reason of I want to provide for them, but also because I want to tell our story to the world.
Go out and tell your story, let it echo far and wide.
I love it.
Oh gosh, I love that song. Okay. What advice would you give to your younger self and younger people listening now, starting out down a similar path?
What's yours will know your face.
Oh, beautiful. I really like that. Okay, hardest question now. Last one. If you can only see one show for the rest of your life, but you can see it as many times as you want, what would you see?
You're talking about plays?
Anything. Interpret as you want. Every episode of 30 Rock with you in it.
No. I actually haven't watched 30 Rock since we have gotten off the air. I would be horrified to see myself now, I think. Oh, good Lord. I don't know. Oh, God. There are some theater pieces that I have seen that have absolutely changed my life and have blown me away. That I would love to just go back and watch again. I think Intimate Apparel is when Viola Davis did it.
She's phenomenal.
Incredible to watch. I think, believe it or not, I think The Goat. I saw The Goat on, and I think I saw it like 4 times. I found something new in it each time. I rewatched Mad Men.
I have never seen Mad Men.
It's Chekhov. I mean, the show is Chekhov. It's Chekhov in the best way. And I rewatched The Sopranos.
Yes.
I wish I could say I rewatched something like super blackety, but so maybe one day I'll come back to a show that's like, no, this is the blackest show I can think of, and I'll watch it every day.
Just hit me on social media, and I'll add it. So speaking of social, then where can we find you online?
On Instagram, I'm by Keith Powell, BY Keith Powell. And on Twitter, I'm Keith Powell, KeithPowell.
And everybody make sure to watch Connecting on Hulu and on Peacock, NBC's streaming service. All right, you can get more of me now at thetheaterpodcast.com. I'm on Instagram and Twitter at theater_podcast. Leave a rating, leave a review. This is edited by Matthew Hendershot. Music you're hearing right now by Jukebox The Ghost and Keith Powell. Thank you so much. I've enjoyed this. I really enjoyed this.
Pleasure. My absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Make the road a little colorful.